Disc 2. Let's now talk about thumb displays. As mentioned earlier, thumbs denote superiority. In palmistry, the thumbs represent strength of character and the ego, and body language signals involving the thumbs also show self-important attitudes. Thumbs are used to display dominance, assertiveness, and sometimes aggressive attitudes. Thumb gestures are secondary gestures and are usually part of a larger cluster. Thumb displays are positive signals, often used in the typical pose of the cool individual who uses them to show superiority. A man will use protruding thumbs around women to whom he's attracted, and people who wear high status or prestige clothing also display their thumbs. You'll rarely see a low status individual, such as a vagrant, doing it. The thumbs protruding from the coat pocket gesture is common to men and women who feel they're in a superior position to others. It's one of Prince Charles's regular gestures and reveals the in-control attitude he feels at the time. In a work environment, the boss will walk around the office with this position, and when the boss is away, the person who is next in charge will walk around using it. But none of the subordinates would dare do it in front of the boss. Arms folded with thumbs pointing upwards is another common thumb cluster. This is a double signal, showing a defensive and negative attitude, that is the folded arms, plus a superior attitude revealed by the thumbs. The person using this cluster usually gestures with his thumbs as he talks, and rocks on the balls of his feet when standing. The thumb can also be used as a signal of ridicule or disrespect when it's used to point at another person. For example, the husband who leans across to his friend, points towards his wife with his thumb and says, "She always nags," is inviting an argument with her. In this case, the thumb is used as a pointer to ridicule her. Consequently, thumb pointing is irritating to most women, particularly when a man does it. Thumb pointing is not common amongst women, although they sometimes use it to point at people they don't like. The thumbs have been used as a sign of power and authority for thousands of years. In Roman times, the thumb held up or down meant life or death to a gladiator. Even without any training, others intuitively decode thumb signals and seem to understand their meaning. Look for them next time you're out anywhere in public. You are now in a position not only to decode thumb signals, but to train yourself to use them.
Now let's look at the hand-to-face gestures. These gestures are important to understand as they are powerful indicators of how truthful people are being. If you told everyone the complete truth all the time, you'd not only end up lonely, you might even finish up in hospital or prison. For example, to your boss.
"Good morning, boss, you talentless slob."
To your mother-in-law.
"So nice to see you, you interfering negative old bat."
When a woman says, "Does this dress make me look fat?" what is your answer? If you're a man and you know what's good for you, you'd say she looks good. But you might have been thinking, the dress doesn't make you look fat, it's all the cake and ice cream you eat that makes you look fat. Let's face it, lying is the oil that greases our social interactions with others and lets us maintain friendly relationships. These are called white lies because their goal is to make others feel comfortable instead of telling them the cold, hard truth. Research shows that social liars are more popular than those who continually tell the truth, even though we know the social liar is lying to us. The most reliable clues to lying are not the words that are spoken, but the gestures a person automatically makes, because they have little or no control over them. So how can you tell when someone is lying, stalling, or simply thinking it over? Recognition of deceit, procrastination, boredom, and evaluation gestures can be some of the most important observation skills you can learn. In this section, we'll teach you the body language signals that give people away. The three wise monkeys symbolize those who hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. Their simple hand-to-face gestures form the basis of the human deceit gestures. In simple terms, when we see, speak, and hear lies or deceit, we are likely to attempt to cover our mouth, eyes, or ears with our hands. People who hear bad news or witness a horrific accident will often cover their entire face with their hands to symbolically stop themselves from seeing or hearing the awful news. This was the gesture that was most observed worldwide when people heard about the planes flying into the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. As we've already said, children often use hand-to-face gestures openly when they lie. If a child tells a lie, he will often cover his mouth with one or both hands in an attempt to stop the deceitful words from coming out. If he doesn't want to listen to a reprimanding parent, he simply covers his ears with his hands to block out the noise. When he sees something he doesn't want to look at, he covers his eyes with his hands or his arms. As he becomes older, these hand-to-face gestures become quicker and less obvious, but they still occur when he is lying, covering up, or witnessing deceit.
As we've said, although we'll be analysing gestures in isolation and discussing them individually, this is not how they usually occur. They're part of a larger gesture cluster and should be analysed as such. When someone is using a hand-to-face gesture, it doesn't always mean that he's lying. It does indicate, however, that the person could be holding back information, and further observation of other gesture clusters can confirm or deny your suspicions. It's important that you avoid interpreting a single hand-to-face gesture in isolation. While there is no single guaranteed facial movement or expression that confirms someone's telling a lie, there are several gesture clusters that you can learn to recognise which will dramatically increase your chances of spotting a lie. The face is used far more than any other part of the body to cover up lies. We use smiles, nods, and winks in an attempt to cover up. But unfortunately for us, our body signals will tell the truth when there's a lack of congruence between our body gestures and our facial signals. Our attitudes and emotions are continually revealed on our faces, and we are completely unaware of it for most of the time. When we're going to try to conceal a lie, or a certain thought flashes into our mind, it can be shown for a split second on our face. We usually interpret someone's quick nose touch as an itch, or that when they rest their hand on their face, they're deeply interested in us, without ever suspecting that we're boring them to death.
In our book, Why Men Lie and Women Cry, we show how women are much better at reading emotions and therefore better at manipulating others with an appropriate lie. Dr. Sanjina O'Connell, author of Mind Reading, conducted a 5-month study into how we lie and also concluded that women are far better liars than men. She found that women tell more complicated lies than men, whereas men tell simple lies such as, "Oh, I missed the bus," or "My mobile phone battery was flat, so that's why I couldn't call you." She also found that attractive people are more believable than unattractive ones, explaining why leaders such as John F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton were able to get away with as much as they did. As we have said, most people believe that when someone is lying, they smile more than usual, but research shows the opposite is true. They smile less. The difficulty with lying is that the subconscious mind acts automatically and independently of our verbal lie, so our body language gives us away. This is why people who rarely tell lies are easily caught, regardless of how convincing they may sound. The moment they begin to lie, their body sends out contradictory signals, and these give us a feeling that they're not telling the truth. During the lie, the subconscious mind sends out nervous energy which appears as a gesture that can contradict what was said. Professional liars such as politicians, lawyers, actors, and television announcers have refined their body gestures to the point where it is difficult to see the lie, and people fall for it hook, line, and sinker. They do it in one of two ways. First, they practice what feel like the right gestures when they tell the lie, and second, they can reduce their gesturing so that they don't use any positive or negative gestures while lying, though this can be very, very hard to do.
Try this simple test. Tell a deliberate lie to someone face to face and make a conscious effort to suppress all your body gestures. Even when your major body gestures are consciously suppressed, numerous micro gestures will still be transmitted. In addition to twitching, pupil dilation and contraction and so on, eye blinking rate increases from 10 blinks per minute to as many as 50 blinks per minute, and many other micro signals also indicate deceit. Research using slow motion cameras shows that these micro gestures can occur within a split second, and it's only people such as professional interviewers, professional salespeople, and very perceptive others who can read them. It's obvious then that to be able to lie successfully, you need to have your body hidden out of sight. Interrogation involves placing a person on a chair in the open or placing him under lights with his body in full view of the interrogators. His lies are much easier to see under these circumstances. Lying is easier if you are sitting behind a desk where your body is partially hidden, peering over a fence, or from behind a closed door. And the best way to lie is over the telephone or in an email. We'll now look at 7 of the most common lying gestures in more detail. Number 1, the mouth cover. This is where the hand covers the mouth as the brain subconsciously instructs it to try to suppress the deceitful words that are being said. Sometimes this gesture might only be several fingers over the mouth, or even a closed fist, but its meaning remains the same. If the person who is speaking uses this gesture, it indicates that they could be lying. If they cover their mouth while you are speaking, it might show that they feel you are hiding something. One of the most unsettling sights a conference speaker can see is his audience using this gesture while he's speaking. A speaker could stop and ask, "Would someone like to ask a question?" Or, "I can see some people disagree." This allows the audience's objections to be brought into the open and gives the speaker the opportunity to qualify his statements and to answer questions, just as he would do if they had their arms crossed.
Number 2 is the nose touch. Sometimes the nose touch can be several quick rubs below the nose, or it may be one quick, almost unnoticeable nose touch. Women perform this gesture with smaller strokes than men, perhaps to avoid smudging their makeup. The important thing is to remember that this type of action should be read in clusters and in context. The person could have hay fever or a cold. Scientists at the Smell and Taste Treatment and Research Foundation in Chicago found that when you lie, chemicals are released, causing tissue inside the nose to swell. This is known as the Pinocchio effect. Increased blood pressure inflates the nose and causes the nerve endings in the nose to tingle, resulting in a brisk rubbing action to the nose with the hand to satisfy the itch. You can't see the swelling with the naked eye, but this is what appears to cause the nose touch gesture. The same phenomenon occurs when a person is upset, anxious, or angry. American neurologist Allan and psychiatrist Charles Wolfe did an extensive analysis of Bill Clinton's testimony to the grand jury on his affair with Monica Lewinsky and found that, when he told the truth, he rarely touched his nose. When he lied, however, he gave a split-second frown before he answered, and he touched his nose once every 4 minutes for a grand total of 26 nose touches. Conversely, Bill Clinton did not touch his nose at all when he answered truthfully, they said. Number 3 is the eye rub. As we've said, when a child doesn't want to look at something, he'll cover his eyes with one or both hands. When an adult doesn't want to look at something distasteful, the eye rub is likely to occur. Men usually rub their eyes vigorously, and if the lie is a real whopper, they will often look away. Women are less likely to use the eye rub. Instead, they will use small, gentle, touching motions just below the eye because they either have been conditioned as girls to avoid making robust gestures or to avoid smudging makeup. They also avoid a listener's gaze by looking away. Lying through your teeth is a commonly used phrase. It refers to a gesture cluster of clenched teeth and a false smile combined with the eye rub. This gesture is used by movie actors to portray insincerity and by polite cultures such as the English who prefer not to tell you exactly what they're thinking.
Number 4 is the ear grab. Putting the hand around or over the ear or tugging at the earlobe is the adult version of the hands over both ears gesture used by the child who wants to block out his parents' reprimands. Other variations of the ear grab include rubbing the back of the ear, the finger drill, where the fingertip is screwed back and forth inside the ear, pulling at the earlobe or bending the entire ear forward to cover the ear hole. The ear grab can also be a signal that the person has heard enough or may want to speak. As with the nose touch, The ear grab is used by a person who is experiencing anxiety. Gesture number 5 is the neck scratch. This is when the index finger, usually of the writing hand, scratches the side of the neck just below the earlobe. Our observations of this gesture reveal that the person scratches an average of 5 times. Rarely is the number of scratches less than 5, and hardly ever more than 5. This gesture is a signal of doubt or uncertainty and is characteristic of the person who says, "I'm not sure I agree." It's very noticeable when the verbal language contradicts it. For example, when the person says something like, "I can understand how you feel," but the neck scratch indicates they don't.
Number 6. The collar pull is also an indicator of lying. Desmond Morris was one of the first to report that lies cause a tingling sensation in the delicate facial and neck tissues, and a rub or a scratch is required to satisfy it. This not only accounts for why people who are uncertain will scratch their neck, it presents a good explanation as to why some people use the collar pull when they lie and suspect they've been caught out. Increased blood pressure during the deceit causes sweat to form on the neck when the deceiver feels that you suspect he's not telling the truth. It also occurs when a person is feeling angry or frustrated and needs to pull the collar away from his neck in an attempt to let the cool air circulate. When you see someone use this gesture, ask, "Could you repeat that please?" or "Could you clarify that point please?" This could cause the would-be deceiver to give the game away. Our final gesture is fingers in the mouth. This is an unconscious attempt by the person to revert to the security of the child sucking on the mother's breast and occurs when a person feels under pressure. A young child substitutes his thumb or a blanket for his mother's breast, and, as an adult, he puts his fingers in his mouth and sucks on cigarettes, pipes, pens and glasses and chews gum. Most hand-to-mouth gestures can be connected to lying or deception, but the fingers in the mouth gesture is an outward indication of an inner need for reassurance, so giving that person guarantees and assurances is a positive move.
Every presenter knows the empty feeling that results when he or she is giving a presentation to someone who says very little and just sits there watching. Fortunately, there are a number of hand-to-cheek and hand-to-chin gestures that can be used as a type of thermometer to test how hot or cold the person's attitude is, and which tell the speaker how well he's doing. When the listener begins to use his hand to support his head, it's a signal that boredom has set in, and his supporting hand is an attempt to hold up his head to stop himself from falling asleep. The degree of the listener's boredom is related to the extent to which his arm and hand are supporting his head. The ultimate boredom signal occurs when the head is fully supported by the hands. The sound of snoring is also a bit of a clue. Signals like drumming the fingers on the table and continually tapping the feet on the floor are often misinterpreted by professional speakers as boredom signals. In fact, they signal impatience. If you see these signals when you're addressing a group of people, a strategic move must be made to get the finger drummer or foot tapper involved in the conversation to avoid his negative effect on other listeners. Any audience that displays boredom and impatience signals together is telling the speaker that his time is up.
Evaluation is shown by a closed hand resting on the chin or cheek, often with the index finger pointing upwards. When the person begins to lose interest but still wants to appear interested for courtesy's sake, the position will alter so that the heel of the palm supports the head as boredom sets in. Genuine interest is shown when the hand lightly rests on the cheek and is not used as a head support. When the index finger points vertically up the cheek and the thumb supports the chin, the listener is having negative or critical thoughts about the speaker or his subject. Sometimes the index finger may rub or pull at the eye as the negative thoughts continue. This gesture is often mistaken as a signal of interest, but the supporting thumb under the chin tells the truth about the critical attitude. Taking a gesture cluster affects a person's attitude, so the longer a person holds it, the longer their critical attitude will remain. This gesture cluster is a signal that immediate action is required by the speaker, either by involving the listener in what he is saying or by ending the encounter. A simple move, such as handing something to the listener to alter his pose, can cause a change in attitude. The next time you have the opportunity to present an idea to a group of people, watch them carefully as you give your idea, and you may notice that many will bring one hand up to their face and use an evaluation gesture. When you come to the end of your presentation and ask the group to give opinions or suggestions, the evaluation gesture will usually stop and a chin-stroking gesture begins. This chin stroke is a signal that the listener is going through the decision-making process, and their next gestures will signal whether their decision is negative or positive. Your best strategy is to stay quiet and watch their next gestures, which will indicate the decision reached. For example, if the chin stroke is followed by crossed arms and legs and the person sits back in their chair, it's a fair bet the answer will be no. This gives you an early opportunity to resell the benefits before the other person verbalizes no and makes it harder to reach an agreement. If the chin stroke is followed by leaning forward with opened arms or picking up your proposal or sample, chances are you have a yes, and you can proceed as if you have an agreement.
Like evaluation gestures, stalling gestures are easy to spot. Someone who wears glasses sometimes follows an evaluation cluster by taking off their glasses and putting one arm of the frame in the mouth instead of using the chin stroke when making their decision. A cigarette smoker will take a puff. When a person puts a pen or a finger in their mouth after you've asked for a decision, this is a signal that he's unsure or that reassurance is needed. The object in the mouth allows him to stall. Sometimes boredom, evaluation and decision-making gestures come in combinations, each showing different elements of a person's attitude. While these gestures are quite simple to read, you mustn't jump to conclusions. We'll illustrate this with a story about a videotaped role play we once conducted. Our interviewee suddenly covered his mouth and rubbed his nose after he'd been asked a question by the interviewer. He used the mouth cover for several seconds before answering, then returned to his open pose. Up to that point in the role play, the interviewee had kept his open posture with his coat unbuttoned, palms visible, nodding his head and leaning forward when he answered questions, so we thought the gestures might have been isolated or out of context. On reviewing the videotape, we asked him about the hand-to-mouth gesture, and he said that when he was asked the question, he thought he could have responded in one of two ways, one negative and one positive. As he thought about the negative answer and about how the interviewer might react to it, he covered his mouth. When he thought about the positive answer, however, his hand dropped away from his mouth and he resumed an open posture. His uncertainty about the interviewer's possible reaction to the negative reply had resulted in a sudden mouth cover. This illustrates how easy it can be to misinterpret a hand-to-face gesture and to jump to wrong conclusions.
There's an old saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul. And throughout history, we've been preoccupied with the eyes and their effect on human behaviour. Eye contact regulates conversation, gives cues of dominance, and can form the basis for suspecting a liar. Eye signals are a vital part of being able to read a person's attitude and thoughts. When people meet for the first time, they make a series of quick judgments about each other based largely on what they see. We use phrases such as, "She looked daggers at him," "He had that gleam in his eyes," "He has shifty eyes," or "She gave him a look to kill." We say a person has Betty Davis eyes, Spanish eyes, bedroom eyes, beady, jealous, unforgiving and piercing eyes. When we use these phrases, we are unwittingly referring to the size of the person's pupils and to his gaze behaviour. The eyes can be the most revealing and accurate of all human communication signals because they are a focal point on the body and the pupil works independently of conscious control. In given light conditions, your pupils will dilate or contract as your attitude and mood change from positive to negative or vice versa. When someone becomes excited, their pupils can dilate up to 4 times their original size. Conversely, an angry, negative mood causes the pupils to contract to what are commonly known as beady little eyes or snake eyes. Lighter eyes can be more attractive because it's easier to see the dilation taking place. In general, pupil size increases when people view something that stimulates them, such as pictures of the opposite sex, or pleasant or unpleasant pictures including foods, political figures, a disabled child, or war scenes, or when listening to music. Hess found that increases in pupil size are positively correlated with mental activity associated with problem solving, reaching maximum dilation as a person arrives at the solution. We applied this research to the business world and demonstrated how people rate models in photographs as more attractive if the photo has been altered to make the pupil area larger. This is an effective way to increase the sales of any product that used a close-up of the face, such as women's cosmetics, hair products, and clothing. The eyes are a key signal in courtship, and the purpose of eye makeup is to emphasize eye display. If a woman is attracted to a man, she will dilate her pupils at him, and he is likely to decode this signal correctly without knowing it. This is why romantic encounters are most successful in dimly lit places, because everyone's pupils dilate and create the impression that couples are interested in each other.
Research has shown that when pornographic films are shown to men, a certain part of their body grows to almost 3 times its usual size. And that part, of course, is the pupils. They dilate. Most women's pupils go the greatest dilation when looking at pictures of mothers and babies. Young babies and children have larger pupils than adults, and babies' pupils constantly dilate when adults are present in an attempt to look as appealing as possible and therefore receive constant attention. This is why the best-selling children's toys almost always have oversized pupils. Scientists don't yet know how this eye information is sent and decoded. They simply know that we can do it. The ability to decode pupil dilation is hardwired into the brain and happens completely automatically. When you're communicating or negotiating, look at the pupils and they will reveal the real feelings. Both sexes have a greater ability to decode eye signals than body signals, and women are better at it than men. Interestingly, humans are the only primates that have whites of the eyes. The white of the eye evolved as a communication aid to allow humans to see where other people were looking, because direction of gaze is linked to emotional states. Women's brains have more hardwiring than men's to read emotions, and one consequence of this is that women have more white of the eye than men. It's not just the eyes themselves that speak volumes. The eyebrow flash is a universal long-distance hello. It's a signal which is also used by monkeys and apes as a social greeting, confirming that it's an inborn gesture. The eyebrows rise rapidly for a split second, then drop again, and its purpose is to draw attention to the face so that clear signals can be exchanged. The only culture that doesn't use the eyebrow flash is the Japanese, where it's considered improper or impolite and has definite sexual connotations. This is an unconscious signal that acknowledges the other person's presence. The golden rule is always eyebrow flash those you like, or the people you want to like you.
In our previous book, Why Men Lie and Women Cry, we show how women widen their eyes by raising their eyebrows and eyelids to create the baby face appearance of a small infant. This has a powerful effect on men by releasing hormones into the brain which stimulate the desire to protect and defend females. Lowering the head and looking up is another submissive gesture that appeals to men because it makes the eyes appear larger and makes a woman appear more childlike. This is because children are so much smaller than adults and spend their looking time gazing up, and this creates a parenting reaction in both men and women. Princess Diana made an art form of keeping her chin down while looking up and exposing her vulnerable neck. This childlike gesture cluster triggered maternal and paternal reactions towards her in millions of people. People who use these submissive gesture clusters usually don't practice them consciously, but they know when they use them, they get a result. It is only when you see eye to eye with another person that a real basis for communication can be established. Some people can make us feel comfortable when they talk with us, others make us feel ill at ease, and some seem untrustworthy. Initially, this has to do with the length of time that they look at us and with how long they hold our gaze as they speak. In most Western and European cultures, to build a good rapport with another person, your gaze should meet theirs about 60 to 70% of the time. This will also cause them to begin to like you. It is not surprising, therefore, that the nervous, timid person who meets our gaze less than 1/3 of the time is rarely trusted. This is also why, in negotiations, dark-tinted glasses should be avoided, as they make others feel you are either staring at them or trying to avoid them.
As with most body language and gestures, the length of time that one person gazes at another can be culturally determined. Always be sure to consider cultural circumstances before jumping to any conclusions. The safest rule when travelling to places such as Japan is to mirror the gaze time of your hosts. When two people meet and make eye contact for the first time, it's usually the person who is subordinate who looks away first. This means that not looking away becomes a subtle way to deliver a challenge or show disagreement when someone gives their opinion or point of view. When the status of the other person is higher, however, for example, the person is your boss, you can send a clear message of disagreement by holding his gaze for only several seconds longer than would be usually acceptable. But it's not a good idea to do this regularly with your boss if you want to keep your job. When a woman wants to get a man's attention across a room, she will meet his gaze, hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, then look away and down. This gaze is long enough for her to send a message of interest and potential submission to him. Experiments have shown that most men are not hardwired to read a woman's first gaze signal, so she usually needs to send it 2 to 3 times for the average man before he picks up on it, 4 times for really slow men, and 5 times or more for the particularly thick. When she finally gets his attention, she'll often use a small version of the eyebrow flash. That is a small, subtle eye-widening gesture that tells him the signal was intended for him.
As we said earlier, many people associate lying with looking away. We conducted a series of experiments where participants were told to tell a series of lies to others in recorded interviews. The footage was then shown to our test group. What we discovered was contrary to a popular belief about liars. Approximately 30% of the liars constantly looked away when they lied, and the viewers spotted these lies around 80% of the time, with women having a better catch rate than men. The other 70% of the liars maintained strong eye contact with their victim, assuming they were less likely to get caught if they did the opposite of what people expected. They were right. Lie catching dropped to an average of 25%, with men scoring a dismal 15% success and women 35%. Women's more intuitive brains were better than men's in detecting voice changes, pupil dilation, and other cues that gave the liar away. This shows that the gaze alone is not a reliable signal of lying, and you need to observe other gestures as well. When a person's gaze meets yours for more than 2/3 of the time, it can mean one of two things. First, he finds you interesting or appealing, in which case he'll also have dilated pupils. Or second, he's hostile towards you and could be issuing a challenge, in which case the pupils will be constricted. As mentioned, women are good at deciphering pupil signals and can distinguish interest from aggression, but men are a lot worse at doing it. This is why the average man can't tell if a woman is about to give him a kiss or slap him in the face. The sideways glance is used to communicate interest, uncertainty, or hostility. When it's combined with slightly raised eyebrows or a smile, it communicates interest and is frequently used as a courtship signal, mostly by women. If it is clustered with downturned eyebrows, furrowed brow, or the corners of the mouth turned down, it signals a suspicious, hostile, or critical attitude.
An increased blinking rate is something else to look for. A normal, relaxed blinking rate is around 6 to 8 blinks per minute, and the eyes are closed for only about 1/10 of a second. People under pressure, for instance when they're lying, are likely to dramatically increase their blinking rate. Extended blinking is an unconscious attempt by the person's brain to block you from their sight because they've become bored or disinterested or feel that they're superior to you. It's as if their brain can no longer tolerate dealing with you, so their eyes shut for 2 or 3 seconds longer to wipe you from their sight, and they remain closed as the person momentarily wipes you from their mind. Superior types may also tilt their head back to give you a long look, commonly known as looking down one's nose. This is also done by a person who feels that their importance is not being noticed. And it's also mainly a Western cultural gesture. If you see it happening during a conversation, it's a signal that you're not doing well and that a new tack is needed. If you believe the person is simply arrogant, try this. When they've closed their eyes for a 3rd or 4th time, quickly step a pace to your left or right. When their eyelids lift again, it gives the illusion that you've disappeared and materialised in another place, and this can really rattle them. If the person also starts snoring, you can safely assume that your communication has failed. Another gesture to look for is darting eyes. When the eyes dart from side to side, it can look as if the person is checking out the activity in the room, but the reality is that the brain is searching for escape routes, revealing a person's insecurity about what's happening. When you're with a particularly boring individual, your natural urge is to look away for escape routes. But because most of us are aware that looking away shows lack of interest in the other person and signals our desire to escape, we tend to look more at the boring individual and use a tight-lipped smile to feign interest. This behaviour parallels what liars are doing when they increase their eye contact to appear convincing. It's important to know that the geographical area of a person's face and body that you gaze upon can dramatically affect the outcome of a face-to-face encounter. When you've finished listening to this next section, try out the techniques we discuss without warning anyone, and you'll experience the powerful effect that these skills can have. It takes about a week of practice for these eye techniques to become a normal part of your communication skills. There are 3 basic types of gazing. There's social gazing, intimate gazing, and power gazing. Number 1 is the social gaze. Experiments into gazing reveal that during social encounters, the gazer's eyes look in a triangular area on the other person's face between the eyes and the mouth for up to 90% of the gazing time. This is the area of the face that we're looking at in a non-threatening situation. When you do this, the other person will perceive you as non-aggressive. Number 2 is the intimate gaze. When people approach each other from a distance, they look quickly between the other person's face and lower body to first establish what sex the person is, and then a second time to determine their level of interest in them. This gaze travels across the eyes and below the chin to lower parts of the person's body. In close encounters, it's the triangular area between the eyes and the chest, and for distant gazing, it's from the eyes to the groin or below. Men and women use this gaze to assess interest in each other, and those who are interested will return the gaze. We usually give 2 quick glances and then look at their face. And, despite most people's strong denials about it, hidden camera studies reveal that everyone does it, including nuns. You know, there's an old joke. Why do men have trouble making eye contact? Because breasts don't have eyes. Like many jokes, this is based on the differences between men and women. Women have a wider-ranging peripheral vision which allows them to check out a man's body from head to toe without getting caught doing it. Male tunnel vision is why a man will move his gaze up and down a woman's body in a very obvious way. This is also the reason why men are constantly accused of ogling women's bodies at close range, but women are rarely accused of the same, even though research shows that women do more of it than men. It's not that men are bigger oglers than women. Men's tunnel vision means they keep getting caught. Gaze number 3 is the power gaze. I want you to now imagine that the person has a third eye in the centre of their forehead. Now look in the triangular area between the person's 3 eyes. The impact this gaze has on the other person has to be experienced to be believed. Not only does it change the atmosphere to very serious, it can stop a bore dead in their tracks. By keeping your gaze directed at this area, you keep the screws firmly on them. Provided your gaze doesn't drop below the level of their eyes, the pressure will stay on them. Never use this in friendly or romantic encounters though. But it works a treat on the person who you want to intimidate, or on the person who just simply won't shut up. If you have soft, weak or wimpy eyes, practice using the power stare to give yourself more authority. When you're under attack from someone, try not to blink while maintaining eye contact. When you look at the attacker, narrow your eyelids and focus closely on that person. When you pan your eyes from one person to another, do it without blinking, and it has an unnerving effect on anyone who watches you do it. To do this, move your eyeballs first and then let your head follow, but your shoulders should remain still. Imagine you're Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. This is a great addition to your body language weapons arsenal.
As we have said, eye contact is one of the most important areas when analysing body language. Many people are taught that in sales or job interviews, you should maintain strong eye contact with the other person and keep it up until you are seated. This creates problems for both the interviewer and the interviewee because it's contrary to the process we like to go through when we first meet people. A man wants to check out a woman's hair, legs, body shape and overall presentation. If she maintains eye contact, it restricts this process, so he's left trying to steal glances at her during the interview without getting caught, so he becomes distracted from the actual job of interviewing. Some women are disappointed that, in a supposedly equal business world, men still do this, but hidden cameras show this to be a fact of business life, whether we like it or not. Video evidence also reveals that women interviewers go through the same evaluation process with both male and female interviewees, but women's wider peripheral vision means that they rarely get caught. Women are also more critical than men of female interviewees whose appearance just doesn't stack up. Women look at male candidates' hair length, clothes designs and coordination, the creases in his trousers and the shine on his shoes. Most men are completely unaware that women look at the condition of the back of the shoes as he walks out. The way to handle all of this is when you go for an interview, shake hands and then give the interviewer a 2 to 3 second frame of uninterrupted time for them to complete the process of looking you over. Look down to open your briefcase or folder or to arrange any papers you might need. Turn to hang up your coat or move your chair in closer and then look up. In filming sales interviews, we found that not only did the interviews feel better for the salesperson who used this strategy, it resulted in a better outcome in sales results.
Many people are becoming familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP as it's known. A person's eye movements can reveal what their mind is focusing on by indicating to you whether they're remembering something they've seen, heard, smelled, tasted or touched. In simple terms, if a person is remembering something that they saw, their eyes will move upward. If they're recalling something they heard, their eyes will look to the side and they tilt their head as if they're listening. If they're recalling a feeling or emotion, they'll look down and to the right. When a person is mentally talking to themselves, they look down and to the left. These eye movements can occur in a fraction of a second and come in clusters, making it harder to read them live. A videotape replay, however, can let you see the discrepancies between what a person says and what they really think. NLP research has shown that 35% of people prefer the visual information channel and will use phrases such as, "I see what you mean," or "That's perfectly clear," and you'll get their attention by showing them photos, charts, graphs, and asking if they get the picture. 25% prefer the auditory channel and use words such as, "That rings a bell," "That doesn't sound right," and they want to be in tune with you. The other 40% prefer the feelings channel and will say things like, "Let's kick that idea around," "Our department needs a shot in the arm," "I can't quite grasp what you're saying." They love to test drive things and to be involved in a demonstration so that they can grasp the idea. NLP is a remarkable discovery, and we recommend you follow this up by reading more detailed studies.
So how can this knowledge about the importance of eye movement be used in day-to-day situations? Well, you can use it to hold eye contact with an audience. As professional conference speakers, we developed a technique for keeping an audience's attention and letting them feel involved. In groups of up to 50 people, it's possible to meet the gaze of each individual. In larger groups, you usually stand back further, so a different approach is needed. By pegging a real or imaginary point or person at each corner of the group and one in the centre, when you stand at a distance of 10 metres from the front row, approximately 20 people in a group of up to 50 will feel you are looking at them individually as you speak, so you can create an intimate bond with most of your audience. Another tip is that when you are giving a visual presentation using books, charts, graphs, or a laptop, it's important to know how to control where the other person is looking. Research shows that of the information relayed to the brain in visual presentations, 83% comes via the eyes, 11% via the ears, and 6% through the other senses. Research has shown that the retention of information from verbal presentations is only 10%. This means that a verbal presentation requires frequent repetition of key points to be effective. By comparison, the retention rate of combined verbal and visual presentation is 50%. This means you will achieve a 400% increase in efficiency through the use of visual aids. The study also found that using visual aids cuts the average business meeting time from 25.7 minutes to 18.6 minutes, a 28% time saving. Another tip is the power lift, where you keep control of where a person is looking. When sitting in a one-to-one situation, use a pen to point to the presentation and at the same time verbalize what he sees. Next, lift the pen from the presentation and hold it between his eyes and your eyes. This has a magnetic effect of lifting his head so that now he is looking at you and he sees and hears what you are saying, achieving maximum absorption of your message. Keep the palm of your other hand open when you are speaking. Interestingly, we found that women hold more direct eye contact than men during presentations, especially when they're not talking. When women are talking, however, they avert their eyes more than men do.
So, to summarise, where you direct your gaze has a powerful impact on the outcome of any face-to-face encounter. If you were a manager who was going to reprimand an errant subordinate or a parent reprimanding a child, which gaze would you use? If you used social gazing, then the sting would be taken out of your words, regardless of how direct or threatening you might try to sound. Social gazing would weaken your words, but intimate gazing would either intimidate or embarrass them. Power gazing, however, has a powerful effect on the receiver and tells them you mean business. What men describe as the come-on look that women use relates to a sideways glance, dilated pupils, and intimate gazing. If a woman wants to play hard to get, she needs to avoid using an intimate gaze and use a social gaze instead. But most men miss a lot of it anyway. To use a power gaze during courting would leave a man or woman labelled as cold or unfriendly. When you use an intimate gaze on a potential partner, however, you give the game away. Women are expert at sending and receiving this gaze, but unfortunately, most men are not. When men use the intimate gaze, it's usually blatantly obvious to women. But on the other hand, most men are generally unaware of having been given an intimate gaze by a woman, much to her frustration.
Let's move on to another very important aspect of body language, personal space. The world is full of clearly defined boundaries over which men have fought and died, and it's the same with one's own personal space or territory. This is the area or space around a person that he claims as his own, including the area that exists around his possessions such as his home, the inside of his motor vehicle, his own bedroom or personal chair. In the early 1960s, American anthropologist Edward Hall discovered there is also a defined airspace around a person's body. In this section, we'll deal mainly with the implications of this airspace, how people react when it is invaded, and the importance of sometimes keeping an arm's-length relationship. Personal territory can expand or contract depending on the local circumstances. Like most animals, each human has his own personal portable air bubble, which he carries around with him. Its size is dependent on the density of the population in the place where he grew up. Personal space is therefore culturally determined. Whereas some cultures, such as the Japanese, are accustomed to crowding, others preferred the wide open spaces, and they like you to keep your distance.
Let's discuss the radius of the air bubble around suburban middle-class people living in Western and Northern European cultures. Children have learnt this spacing by age 12, and it can be broken down into 4 distinct zone distances. Starting from the closest, they are, first, the intimate zone. This is between 6 and 18 inches away, that's 15 to 45 centimetres. Of all the zone distances, this is by far the most important, as it's the zone that a person guards as if it was his own property. Only those who are emotionally close to us are permitted to enter. These include lovers, parents, spouse, children, close friends, relatives and pets. There is a subzone that extends up to 6 inches or 15 centimetres from the body that can be entered only during intimate physical contact. This is known as the close intimate zone.
Number 2 is the personal zone between 18 and 48 inches, say half to 1.3 metres. This is a distance we stand from others at cocktail parties, office parties, social functions and friendly gatherings.
Number 3 is the social zone, which is between 4 and 12 feet. That's 1.5 to 3 metres. We stand at this distance from strangers, a plumber or carpenter doing repairs around our home, the postman, the local shopkeeper, the new employee at work, and people whom we don't know very well.
Number 4, the public zone, which is more than 12 feet or 3.5 metres. Whenever we address a large group of people, this is the comfortable distance at which we choose to stand. All these distances tend to reduce between 2 women and increase between 2 men.
Our intimate zone, which is 6 to 18 inches away, or 15 to 45 centimetres, is normally entered by another person for one of 2 reasons. First, the intruder is a close relative or friend, or he or she may be making sexual advances. Second, the intruder is hostile and may be about to attack. While we tolerate strangers moving within our personal and social zones, the intrusion of a stranger into our intimate zone causes physiological changes to take place within our bodies. The heart pumps faster, adrenaline pours into the bloodstream, and blood is pumped to the brain and muscles as physical preparations for a possible fight or flight situation are made. This means that putting your arm, in a friendly way, around someone you've just met may result in that person feeling very negative towards you, even though they may smile and appear to enjoy it in order not to offend you. If you want people to feel comfortable around you, the golden rule is keep your distance. The more intimate our relationship is with other people, the closer they will permit us to move within their zones. For example, a new work employee may initially feel that the other staff members are cold towards him, but they're only keeping him in the social zone until they know him better. As he becomes better known to them, the distance between them decreases until eventually he's permitted to move within their personal zones, and in some cases, within their intimate zones. The distance that 2 people keep their hips apart when they embrace also reveals clues about the relationship between them. Lovers press their torsos against each other and move within each other's close intimate zones. This differs from the kiss received from a stranger on New Year's Eve, from your best friend's spouse, or your dear old Aunt Sally, all of whom keep their pelvic area at least 6 inches away from yours. Crowding at concerts, cinemas, in trains and buses results in unavoidable intrusion into other people's intimate zones, and people's reactions are really fascinating to watch. There's a list of unwritten rules that most cultures follow rigidly when faced with a crowded situation such as a packed lift, in line at the sandwich shop, or on public transport. Here are the common lift riding rules. First, there will be no talking to anyone, including a person you know. Second, avoid eye contact with others at all times. Third, maintain a poker face. No emotion is permitted to be shown. Fourth, if you have a book or newspaper, pretend to be deeply engrossed in it. Fifth, in bigger crowds, no body movement is allowed. Sixth, you must watch the floor numbers changing at all times. This type of behaviour is known as masking, and it's common everywhere. It's simply each person's attempt to hide their emotions from others by wearing a neutral mask. Masking is also used by people who travel to work in the rush hour on public transport. The blank expressionless look on the faces of the travellers are, in fact, an example of masking, sticking to the rules that apply to the unavoidable intrusion into their intimate zones in a crowded public place. When a person claims a space or an area among strangers, such as a seat in the cinema, a place at the conference table, or a towel hook at the health club, he does it in a predictable way. He usually looks for the widest space available between two others and claims the area in the centre. At the cinema, he'll choose a seat that's halfway between the end of the row and where the nearest person is sitting. At the health club, he chooses a towel hook that's in the largest space available, midway between two other towels or midway between the nearest towel and the end of the towel rack. The purpose of this ritual is to avoid offending others by being either too close or too far away from them. At the cinema, if you choose a seat more than halfway between the end of the row and the nearest person, that person may feel offended that you're too far away from him, or he may feel intimidated if you sit too close. The main purpose of this spacing ritual is to maintain harmony, and it appears to be learned behaviour. An exception to this rule is the spacing that occurs in public toilet blocks. We found that people choose the end toilets about 90% of the time, and, if they're already occupied, the midway principle is then used. Men always try to avoid standing beside strangers at a public urinal and always obey the unwritten male law of death before eye contact. Unspoken territorial rules state that a restaurant table is divided equally down the middle, and staff carefully place the salt, pepper, the sugar, and other accessories equally on the centre line. As the meal progresses, subtly move the salt across to the other person's side, then the pepper, then the flowers, and so on. Before long, this subtle territorial invasion will cause a reaction in your lunchmate. They either sit back to regain their space or start pushing everything back towards the centre.
There are cultural factors affecting zone distances, and you must take this into consideration when analysing someone's body language. To illustrate this, here's a story about a young Italian couple who migrated from Italy to live in Sydney, Australia, and they're invited to join a local social club. Several weeks after joining, 3 female members complained that the Italian man was making sexual advances towards them and they felt uncomfortable around him. The male members of the club felt the Italian woman had also been behaving as if she could be sexually available. This situation illustrates the complications that can happen when cultures with different space needs come together. Many southern Europeans have an intimate distance of only 8 to 11 inches, which is 20 to 30 centimetres, and in some places it's even less. The Italian couple felt at ease and relaxed when standing at a distance of 10 inches, which is 25 centimetres, from the Australians, but were totally unaware of their intrusion into the Australians' 45 centimetres or 18 inches intimate zone. Italian people also use more eye contact and touch more than Australians, which gives rise to further misjudgments about their motives. The Italians were shocked when this was pointed out to them, but they resolved to practice standing back at a more culturally accepted distance. What seemed to the Italian couple to be a perfectly normal social encounter was being interpreted by the Australians as a sexual advance. The Italians thought the Australians were being cold and unfriendly because they kept moving away from the Italians to keep a comfortable distance. Moving into the intimate zone of the opposite sex is a way of showing interest in that person and is commonly called an advance. If the advance into the intimate zone is rejected, the other person will step backwards to reclaim their space. If the advance is accepted, the other person holds his ground and allows the intruder to remain. To measure a man's level of interest in her, a woman will step into his intimate zone and then step back out again. If he's interested, this cues him into stepping into her space whenever he makes a point. At our international conferences, city-born Americans usually stand 18 to 48 inches, which is about 45 to 120 centimetres from each other. and stand in the same place while talking. If you watch a Japanese and an American talking, the two will slowly begin to move around the room, the American moving backwards away from the Japanese and the Japanese moving forward. This is an attempt by both the American and Japanese to adjust to a culturally comfortable distance from each other. The Japanese, with his smaller 10-inch or 25-centimetre intimate zone, continually steps forward to adjust to his spatial need. But this invades the American's intimate zone, forcing him to step backwards to make his own spatial adjustment. Video recordings of this phenomenon, replayed at high speed, gives the illusion that the two men are waltzing around the room with the Japanese leading. This is one of the reasons why, when negotiating business, Asians, Europeans, or Americans often look at each other with suspicion. The Europeans or Americans refer to the Asians as pushy and familiar, and the Asians refer to the Europeans or Americans as cold, standoffish, and cool. This lack of awareness of intimate zone variations between cultures can easily lead to misconceptions and inaccurate assumptions about one culture by another.
People raised in a country town with a small population may have a space bubble up to 36 inches, that's 1 metre, or more. And this is the average measured distance from the wrist to the body when a country person shakes hands. Rural people tend to stand with their feet firmly planted on the ground and lean forward to meet your handshake, whereas a city dweller will step forward to greet you. People raised in remote areas can have an even larger personal space need, which could be as wide as 18 feet, that's 6 metres. They often prefer not to shake hands at all, but would rather stand at a distance and wave. Property a person owns, or a space he regularly uses, constitutes a private territory, and just as with his personal bubble, he'll fight to defend it. A person's home, office and car represent a territory, each having clearly marked boundaries in the form of walls, gates, fences and doors. Each territory may have several sub-territories. For example, in a home, a person's private territory may be their kitchen, and they'll object to anyone invading it when they're using it. A businessman may have his favourite place at the conference table, diners have their favourite seat in the cafe, and mum and dad have their favourite chair at home. These areas are usually marked by either leaving personal possessions on or around the area, or by frequent use of it. People driving in a car can often react in a way that's completely unlike their normal social territorial behaviour.
A motor vehicle seems to have a magnifying effect on the size of a person's personal space. In some cases, this territory is magnified up to 10 times the normal size, so the driver feels that he has a claim to an area of 25 to 30 feet, around 8 to 10 metres, in front of and behind his car. When another driver cuts in front of him, even if it wasn't dangerous, the driver may go through a physiological change, becoming angry and even attacking the other driver in what is known as road rage. Compare this to the situation that occurs when the same person is stepping into a lift and another person steps in front of him, invading his personal territory. His reaction in those circumstances is normally apologetic, and he allows the other person to go first, dramatically different from what happens when the same person cuts in front of him on the open road. So in summary, the personal space issue is a vital component of body language, and you will be included or rejected by others depending on the respect that you have for their personal space. This is why the happy-go-lucky person who slaps everyone he meets on the back or continually touches people during a conversation is secretly disliked by everyone. Many factors can affect the spatial distance a person takes in relation to others, so it's wise to consider every criterion before making a judgment about why a person is keeping a certain distance.
Research has shown that the farther away from the brain a body part is positioned, the less awareness we have of what it's doing. For example, most people are aware of their face and what expressions and gestures they're displaying, and we can even practice some expressions that put on a brave face or give a disapproving look. We grin and bear it or look happy when Granny gives us another hideous birthday gift. After our face, We are less aware of our arms and hands, then our chest and stomach, and we are least aware of our legs and almost oblivious to our feet. The legs evolved in humans to serve two purposes: to move forward and get food, and to run away from danger. Because the human brain is hardwired for these two objectives, to go towards what we want and to move away from what we don't, the way a person uses their legs and feet reveals where they want to go. In other words, they show a person's commitment to leaving or staying in a conversation. Open or uncrossed leg positions show an open or dominant attitude, while crossed leg positions reveal closed attitudes and uncertainty. This means that the legs and feet are an important source of information about someone's attitude, because most people are unaware of what they're doing with them and never consider faking gestures with them, in the way that they would with their face. A person can look composed and in control while their foot is repetitively tapping and revealing their frustration at not being able to escape. In the same way, a woman who's not interested in a man will fold her arms on her chest and cross her legs away from him, giving him the no-go body language, while an interested woman would open herself to him.
So let's have a look at how we use the lower halves of our body. There are 4 main standing positions. Number 1 is standing to attention. This is a formal position that shows a neutral attitude with no commitment to stay or go. In male-female encounters, it is used by women more than men, as it effectively keeps the legs together like a no-comment signal. School children use it when talking to a teacher, junior officers use it when talking to senior officers, people meeting royalty do it, and employees use it when talking to the boss. Number 2 is standing with your legs apart. As mentioned earlier, this is predominantly a male gesture and is like a standing crotch display. The crotch displayer plants both feet firmly on the ground, making a clear statement that he has no intentions of leaving. It is used as a dominant signal by men because it projects a macho-looking attitude. Number 3 is the foot forward position. In this stance, the body weight is shifted to one hip, which leaves the front foot pointing forward. This is a valuable clue to a person's immediate intentions because we point our lead foot in the direction our mind would like to go, and this stance looks as if the person is beginning to walk. In a group situation, we point our lead foot at the most interesting or attractive person, but when we want to leave, we point our feet at the nearest exit. Position number 4 is the leg cross. The next time you attend a meeting with men and women, you will notice some groups of people standing with their arms and legs crossed, i.e., one leg bent at the knee with the lower leg crossing the shin of the straight leg. Look more closely and you'll also see that these people are standing at a greater distance from each other than the customary social distance. This is how most people stand when they are amongst people whom they don't know well. If you interact with them, you will find that one or all of them are unfamiliar with the others in the group. While uncrossed legs can show openness or dominance, crossed legs show a closed, submissive or defensive attitude as they symbolically deny any access to the genitals. For a woman, positions like the scissors, both legs straight but both legs crossed, and the single leg cross send 2 messages. 1, that she intends to stay, not leave, and 2, that access is denied. When a man does it, it also shows he'll stay but wants to be sure you won't kick him where it hurts. Open legs display masculinity, closed legs protect masculinity.
Imagine now that you notice another group of people standing with their arms unfolded, palms visible, a relaxed appearance, and are leaning back on one leg with the other one pointing towards others in the group. All are gesturing with their hands and are moving in and out of each other's personal space. Closer investigation would reveal that these people are friends or are known personally to each other. The first group, with the arms crossed and legs crossed, may have relaxed facial expressions and conversation that sounds free and easy, but the folded arms and legs tell us that they're not as relaxed and confident with each other as they would be trying to appear. Try this. Join a group where you know no one and stand with your arms and legs tightly crossed and wear a serious expression. One by one, the other group members will cross their arms and legs and remain in that position until you, the stranger, leave. Walk away and watch how, one by one, the members of the group assume their original poses once again. Crossing the legs not only reveals negative or defensive emotions, it makes a person appear insecure and causes others to react accordingly. As people begin to feel more comfortable in a group and get to know others, they move through a series of movements taking them from the defensive crossed arms and legs position to the relaxed open position. This opening up procedure follows the same sequence everywhere. It begins with the closed position with arms and legs crossed. As they begin to feel comfortable with each other and rapport builds, their legs uncross first and their feet are placed together in the attention position. Next, the arm folded on top of the arm cross comes out and the palm is occasionally flashed when speaking, but is eventually not used as a barrier. Instead, it may hold the outside of the other arm in a single arm barrier. Both arms unfold next, and one arm gestures or may be placed on the hip or in the pocket. Finally, one person takes a foot forward position, showing acceptance of the other person.
Just to slightly complicate things, there are different types of seated leg cross positions that you need to watch out for. In the European leg cross, one leg is crossed neatly over the other, with 70% of people crossing left over right. This is the normal crossed leg position used by European, Asian, and British cultures. When a person crosses both legs and arms, they have emotionally withdrawn from the conversation, and it can be futile to try and be convincing when they sit like this. In business contexts, we have found that people sitting like this talk in shorter sentences, reject more proposals, and can recall less detail of what was discussed than those who sit with their arms and legs in an open position. Next up is the American figure 4, where one leg is bent and crossed over the other with the ankle resting on the bent knee of the opposite leg. This is still relatively uncommon in Britain and Europe among older people, but it is now seen in diverse cultures such as Russia, Japan, Sardinia, and Malta among the younger generations who are addicted to American films and television and are now mirroring what they see. This position is a seated version of a crotch display as it highlights the genitals and is used by mainly American males to show an argumentative or competitive attitude. Studies also show that most people make most of their final decision when both feet are on the ground, so the figure 4 is not conducive to asking someone to make a decision. Some people turn the figure 4 into a permanent position using one or both hands as a clamp. This is a sign of a tough-minded, stubborn individual who rejects any opinion other than their own. Research shows that when the mind closes, the body follows, so if you're trying to persuade someone who sits in any of these crossed legs positions, you should attempt to get them to uncross before continuing. If you have something to show, invite them to sit beside you or give them things to do or to hold so that they can lean forward to write notes or hold brochures or samples. And by the way, offering tea or coffee also works well, as it makes it hard for a person to cross their arms and legs without burning themselves.
Another leg gesture to watch for is the ankle lock, where one ankle is crossed over the other. The male version of the ankle lock is often combined with clenched fists resting on the knees, or with hands tightly gripping the arms of the chair, or a seated crotch display. The female version varies slightly. The knees are held together, the feet may be to one side, and the hands rest side by side or on top of one another, resting on the upper legs. Over 3 decades of interviewing and selling to people, we've noted that when an interviewee locks his ankles, he's mentally biting his lip. This gesture shows that he's holding back a negative emotion, uncertainty or fear. The feet are usually withdrawn under the chair, showing that the person also has a withdrawn attitude. When people are involved in a conversation, they also put their feet into the conversation. Researchers found that by using questioning techniques, you can often encourage people to unlock their ankles and become more open and involved. In the initial stages of studying the ankle lock, we found that asking questions had a 42% success rate in getting interviewees to relax and unlock their ankles. We discovered, however, that if an interviewer walks around to the interviewee's side of the desk and sits beside him, removing the desk as a barrier, the interviewee would often relax and unlock his ankles, and the conversation would take on a more open, personal tone. Women who wear miniskirts cross their legs and ankles for obvious necessary reasons. But through years of habit, however, many older women will still sit in this position, which can not only make them feel restrained, but others are likely to unconsciously read it as negative and react towards these women with caution. The leg twine gesture is almost exclusively used by women and is the trademark of a shy, timid woman or a part-time contortionist. The top of one foot wraps around the other leg to reinforce an insecure attitude and shows she's retreated into a shell like a tortoise, despite how relaxed her upper body may appear. A warm, friendly, low-key approach is needed if you eventually hope to open this clam. A popular leg gesture for women is parallel legs, where the legs are crossed above the knee so that both lower legs are almost parallel with each other, usually angled at 45 degrees. Because of the bone configuration of female legs and hips, it becomes a powerful signal of femininity because most men can't do it. Not surprisingly, over 86% of male participants in our leg rating surveys voted parallel legs as the most attractive female sitting position. One leg presses against the other and gives the legs a healthier, more youthful look, which appeals to men from a reproductive standpoint. This is the position taught to women in deportment and modelling classes. Parallel legs should not be confused with the woman who constantly crosses and uncrosses her legs when she's with the man she fancies. This is done to draw attention to her legs. Another important point to keep in the back of your mind is that when we're interested in either a conversation or a person, we put 1 foot forward to shorten the distance between us and that person. If we're reticent or not interested, we put our feet back, usually under a chair if we're seated. Typical male courtship body language gestures include foot forward, legs apart, crotch display, and arms splayed to try to enlarge the overall perceived size and take up more space. Typical female no-go body language signals include legs together, body facing away, arms folded, and minimising the amount of space she occupies, so he's probably wasting his time.
So, to recap, our feet tell others where we want to go and who we do and don't like. If you're a woman, avoid crossing your legs when you're sitting with businessmen unless you're wearing a long dress. The rule here is simple. For social contexts, exposed crossed legs are fine, but don't do it in business. If you're a man dealing with women in business, the same rule applies. Keep your knees together. Male crotches intimidate.
End of Disc 2.